Hezbollah is in a very difficult position.
They're Iran's army in Lebanon. If you attack Iran, look out for what Hezbollah will do.
Hardest shift I've covered, like as a journalist.
The speech is not proportional with what Hezbollah used to represent.
I hated myself for like doing my job during this time.
I see this kind of arrangement, which is to me less Lebanon and more Iran, as fundamentally problematic.
When Issam Abdallah was killed, it was a turning point.
You'd have to be blind to only blame Hezbollah on everything that goes wrong in Lebanon. But you have to also be blind to treat them as one and the same.
Hezbollah would not deny that Iran has a saying in their decision making.
Wael Taleb, welcome to MTV.
Thank you for having me.
For me, it's a privilege. You're a friend. You're somebody that I've seen grow into your work. You're a full-time journalist. You're currently working at L'Orient today, a reporter, a news reporter, and also a features writer. And I've seen your work shine, especially during times of crisis. And I want to get into your written work today. But before that, I think something that has to be discussed is the psychological well-being of a journalist during this crisis. Somebody we both know from the journalism world, a videographer for Reuters, Issam Abdallah, was killed doing his work. He paid the ultimate price. In the south, an Israeli missile killed him. There's risks involved. And I think even if you're not in the south full-time covering the war, there is an emotional toll that this can take on any reporter or any commentator. And I really want to get into your psychological state at the moment. And I want to start here. What is it like to be covering this horrific phase in our region's history? And afterwards, I'll give you the mic, and you can ask me what I think about similar topics. But let's start with you. Your emotional state during this crisis.
Yes, that's a very good subject to get into. I think every journalist is suffering from this one way or another. I mean, we're all experiencing this as people. Not gonna claim it's harder on a journalist, but like we have our own struggles. That day you were talking about, sorry, the Issam Abdallah one. I didn't know Issam personally, but a lot of journalists were targeted. Journalists I knew, some of them. And it was probably the hardest shift I've covered, like as a journalist. Even though I've covered intense stuff like the Tayuni clashes, I was in the field. Thawra, I covered it all. Beirut explosion. But for some reason, that day was an emotional day for me. There are stuff that you like. We had people crying at the office. People who didn't know Issam personally, but I don't know, you relate, like it could be you out there in the field. And like the fact that I had to ask Issam's boss, who's a friend of mine, is it true? That was a very difficult, and I hated myself for like doing my job during this time. That was a very hard thing for me to do. In general, what you were saying, like so the psychological state of journalists, yes, like we see it we cannot escape it, even on our off day. Like for example, Nasrallah's speech is coming on Saturday. I'm off. Can I escape Nasrallah's speech? Of course not. I'm gonna be following Nasrallah. I think not just journalists, everyone will be following because he has an influence on the matter. But as a journalist, you cannot escape the news. You have the groups all the time. It's happening in the south, yes, not in Beirut, but yeah, you cannot escape it, and it takes a toll on you. And you, like, because this is wartime, like the news is you have to be there. You cannot, it's exhausting. You don't have off days, because even on your off days, you're still helping in some way. Even if you're not helping, you're following. You cannot take vacation, like you can, but you wouldn't accept yourself taking a vacation day during this time, because partially because you feel that you have an added value to give to the newspaper, partially because you feel that it's not, you have to contribute in some way. I'll give another example. I remember during the port explosion, I was a freelancer back then. I wasn't working in a news outlet. But the first day when it happened, I felt so paralyzed. It was a very hard feeling. It was a very ugly feeling. Not until I started reporting on the subject that I felt better. I felt that I'm contributing in a way. So, yes.
There's one piece in particular I want to get into. It was released in Lorient today, almost 2 weeks ago. And I think it was, yes, I have the date here, 25th of October. I wrote it down. It's still online. No story is worth your life. Journalists reflect on South Lebanon coverage after Reuters colleague killed, in reference to Isam Abdallah. And one person mentioned in the piece is actually somebody who works here at MTV.
Yes.
Wael Taleb, if I'm not mistaken, is almost like the second main voice in that piece, in that she's on the scene by choice, and she's covering the news because she's a dedicated journalist, and she's risking her life by going to the front line. But at the same time, in her private life, she's extra cautious.
Yes.
Which I thought was a nice way of focusing on the determination of a journalist. And in this piece, you have a wide range of voices that are from the more cautious to the more, I don't know what the word is, maybe almost recklessly passionate. There's a range in between. Yeah. But I want to get into the meaning of this piece. Are you trying to, in a way, celebrate the dedication of a journalist and also focusing on what might be real limits to your work?
Yeah, it's rather than celebration, it's like presenting the experience of a journalist covering the border. Because, it's not easy. Like Nawal Berri, you said, like she was, how she's covering the war was very impressive. I was very surprised when she told me that in her personal life, she's afraid of, I don't know, cockroaches or like heights, or she said she doesn't go to the Medina. But she, like on the border, especially before journalist Isam Abdallah was killed, she was very free. Like as she described, she was very free, roaming around the border during this time. She said not until Isam Abdallah was, and she said before I get into this, she said because she's from the south, the noises, the voices you hear, like the strikes voices or the plane voices or the noise they make, she's very used to them. So it's a familiar. She feels at home. That's why she was very brave into this. But she said that when Isam Abdallah was killed, it was a turning point. And I think every journalist told me this. Like when Isam Abdallah was killed, it was, guys, it could be us. We have to be more careful than we already are. So as far as I understand, Nawal, she volunteered to go to the border because that's, I was talking about the port explosion and how I felt paralyzed before doing this. She's like, I was watching the news. I was watching Al Jazeera, and she didn't say FOMO, but she said, I have something. I want to go there. She could not feel at ease without going to the border and cover this. That's for Nawal. Edmond Sassine, who's has very good long experience with covering
he's in LBC, is that right?
Yes, and wars. Yeah. Also, his bio was very impressive. Like he's covered Jabal al-Mahsin, Babit Bene, like he goes way back, and he escaped death many times. And I wonder how someone like him would still go and cover such things. Like I don't know if I'm personally capable of that. Like with all the traumas that he has gotten probably from these incidents, he escaped death many times. But he also focused on mental health, and he said every journalist covering war, conflicts, whatever, should seek help in terms of that. So I guess it helps him in a way. But his description of his job was very unique and impressive. He said, a journalist is like a military soldier.
Yeah.
They don't wish to be on the border, but it's their job to go to the border when they are needed do their job professionally. So that's how he views himself.
So in that article, there's a lot of, and it's not just them. There's even a Swiss journalist who's here, a
Yes.
Spanish journalist. You're getting a range of voices, and some even admit that they're not necessarily qualified, but they're here anyway,
Yes.
which I like that. It's almost an honesty in that everyone is here trying to do the right thing,
Yes.
given the risks involved, and you lose a colleague on the way, and not just him, obviously, not just Isam Abdullah, but that kind of dedication and the real risks involved. In your own work, do you find yourself maybe taking precautions in your written word? And I know it's not necessarily, you're not on the front lines, but you are covering the story. Do you have not necessarily self-censorship, not
Yes.
that, but more in you maybe choose your words a little more carefully?
For sure, especially now, like people are full of emotions nowadays. Nowadays, if you try to be objective, whatever objectivity means, like if you try to be nuanced, people would get mad at you because you're trying to be professional. Like a lot of people don't understand that you're not a propaganda. Like in spite of the fact, like in this war and the skirmishes that are happening, I'm with the Lebanese side. Whatever criticism I have against the Lebanese side that is participating, I'm like Lebanese people are dying. It's so emotional. Lebanese people from the villages that are next to my village. So like, of course I am on this side. But when you're trying to do this, your job, you have to be like nuanced and fair. Like for example, if the IDF claims something, in spite of the fact that the IDF, the Israeli army, lies a lot, you have to report it. And people get mad at you for doing that. Like when the Israeli army says, we targeted Hezbollah positions, whatever, you have to report it. So by trying to be objective, you cover both sides of the story. So like the Israeli army said this, Hezbollah said this. And this is how you cover the subject. This is how you try to be as objective as possible. Now, where does your Lebanese side show? And partially it helps that you don't have the resources on the other side. Like, nor do I have the will to, like, during these times to cover what's happening there. But like, yeah, whenever a civilian dies, whenever Israel strikes Lebanon, you are covering what's the damages that are happening in Lebanon. So, yeah.
So this kind of self-admission that you have to do your job, even if your emotions are closer to home. And you said it yourself, this is a part of the country that you're from as well. So it could hurt even more than other people in this country in various degrees. Do you struggle with this? Does it feed into your work in any way? In a personal way, do you find that it takes a toll on you to search for objectivity? And the reason I ask it this way is I've had this conversation with other journalists.
Yes.
And I think there's no right answer here. I personally think the pursuit for objectivity is a noble one. And I think that can also cause extra psychological pressure. So do you find yourself there, trying to do the right thing, pursuing objectivity, even when it's not the side you're celebrating, it's a side and you said it already, you have a side, but you're not going to let that intrude on your work.
Sure. I mean, I'm going to ask you about this later because I'm interested in your opinion, but...
I'll cut the mic before then.
Yeah. No, yes, as for example, the title of this article, I cannot remember it precisely.
I'll say it again. No story is worth your life.
But there's a remaining,
Journalists reflect
Yes.
on South Lebanon coverage after Reuters colleague killed.
Okay, Reuters colleague killed. I had people being mad at me for not saying Reuters, a journalist killed by Israel.
Right.
But that was not, of course, when the strike happened, what we reported was journalists were targeted in an Israeli strike. But that was not the story. The story was a reflection of journalists on their own experience. And it is written in my article that Israel is the side that targeted these journalists. Israel is the side that killed the journalists and injured others. But still, people talking about the emotions people have nowadays and how you cannot please everyone. People still got mad at me for not saying killed by Israel. So how do you escape that? You cannot escape that. All I'm doing is whenever someone is mad at me for something, I try to explain it, like patiently. And yeah, this takes a toll on you because what you're doing is doing your job basically, and not everyone is aware of the fact that a journalist should strive for objectivity. We cannot be objective. We have our biases, but striving for that is the noble thing to do.
That's interesting. You know, I remember even Reuters tripping on how they were talking about their own colleagues' death.
Yes.
And they found a way later to maybe improve
Yes.
their own coverage. But I appreciate the striving because there's no perfect solution to this kind of coverage. And this is a way for me to segue into something we both experience. Everyone experiences it in this country, and I'll lay it out the way I see it. So this episode will come out a few days after Hassan Nasrallah's second speech. So it's going to come out on Tuesday.
Yeah.
His speech on Saturday would have already passed. Let's go back in time to the first speech, which is last Friday. It's remarkable. There's no one else in this country that when they go on television, the city is dead. No one else. I was on my scooter, on the ring. The moment his speech began, it's insane. Everyone goes home.
Yes.
So there's real fear. And there's real expectation, which is really where it shows almost where power is today in this country. No one else can take people home on anticipation of war other than this one person when he talks. So there's that weight. Yet, we're all trying to cover that kind of speech and then offer analysis, which is its own journey. And you hear all types of reactions. But this speech in particular was unusual in that I think it's largely explained to be underwhelming and a disappointment for people that were seeking war, which is equally astonishing. And I think that is a way to ask, did you find yourself expecting something, and were you covering it in a way that it's almost like anticipation that journalism and war are going to become one? And were you yourself perhaps surprised at the reaction, or even perhaps the speech itself? So covering the potential for war and then your own sort of narrative afterwards. Did you feel like everyone else and that, what the hell was that?
To be honest, I wasn't surprised of the speech. I don't know why you were surprised yourself, Ronnie. It was the moment everyone knew that it's not gonna be a big escalation, at least for my part, is when Hezbollah scheduled his speech 5 days beforehand. And I remember I was a kid and I was 12 in 2006, but I remember when Hezbollah has something important to announce, it will announce it either the same day or the next day. So yeah, the fact that it was scheduled 5 days ahead was an indication of something.
With social media trailers and almost like the launching of a show.
Yeah, that's another issue, but another thing to discuss. But when this happened, it was an indication. I was expecting the speech to be very similar to what he announced. I think Hezbollah's supporters. I mean, it's Hezbollah's call to start nowadays on the south to start a full-scale war or not. Israel has made it clear that it's on defense. It's even Netanyahu. He said at one point, we don't know if Hezbollah wants to start a full-scale war or not. So it's Hezbollah's call. Hezbollah is in a very difficult position. They want to, in a way, help their allies, Hamas, in Gaza, I don't think they accept what's happening in Gaza, even from a humanitarian level. Like, I don't think they accept it without interfering. Like, it doesn't it's against their ideology, and it doesn't look good in front of their supporters. At the same time, I think Hezbollah has, like the Lebanese population in general, I think the majority don't want to enter a full-scale war. Lebanon is struggling nowadays. And I think Hezbollah's population, I haven't done statistics, but as far as I understand, people have kids, people have families. We all feel sad for Gaza, but it's different when your own family, your own self is at risk. And I think Hezbollah understands this very well. So going back to the speech, no, I think, again, from that indication, I expected something like this. And then Nasrallah said it explicitly. Okay, all options are on the table. But basically he said, there's no full-scale war for now.
It almost felt like it was the most disappointment I've ever seen on all sides from one person's communication. And the reason I'm going in that direction is because I'm not surprised by the situation. I'm surprised by the communication. My surprise comes from maybe this group's propaganda implies more than what we think, which is they're also caught off guard. And maybe they don't really have an answer right now. And maybe they're not making the shots. Maybe really they're waiting to see what Iran wants long term from this situation. It's almost like we're seeing the most unusual circumstance, which is Hezbollah really is losing the narrative.
I don't know about Hezbollah losing the narrative. Getting into the relationship between Hezbollah and Iran, I think there's the so-called axis of resistance that Iran, Hezbollah and Hamas is part of. Hezbollah would not deny that Iran has a saying in their decision-making. Nasrallah says it like our following is for Wilayat al-Faqih. Now, who has, does Hezbollah has enough independency, freedom in its decision-making to call for a full-scale war or not? I really don't know, personally. I don't know if it's their call or not. Going back to the communication and the decision-making, yes, for sure, Nasrallah spoke, I don't know, what was it, 3 weeks after, 2 weeks after?
Something like that,
Yeah, because they did not know what to do.
Maybe even 3 weeks.
Because they didn't know what to do. But I think after Nasrallah decided to speak, I think they had, not fully, but they had an idea of what their plan is. The communication of Nasrallah, interestingly, I have people on chats, groups, WhatsApp groups, who don't support Hezbollah from their own community. And at the beginning of the speech, Nasrallah played the moral argument very well. He has, despite what his intentions is, why Hezbollah would want to intervene. And Gaza, is it for their allies? Is it to score political points? Is it for a noble cause? Nasrallah said, the whole world has abandoned on Palestine. The Arab world has abandoned on Palestine. We are the only side who are helping them. And I think he made this point, despite, if I agree with him, he played this point very well. I had people who are against him saying, guys, he's making good points. But
No, I found it hard. This is, maybe we can,
yeah.
I don't want to challenge you too much on this because it's opinion. You could be right in the end. I'm just noticing that it's hard to cover this man's speech today because he's selling himself as the resistance fighter while doing cosmetic attacks against the Israeli army. He's building up to this momentum, this speech that we're all going to listen to with TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, sharing these weird snippets of a man who's aged, walking by a flag that has lost its meaning, and then listening to an hour and a half speech of what sounded purely propaganda. And then it struck me as a moment where people were not everyone, but a sizable chunk of the coverage was, what was that? It almost felt like he had lost the narrative, and covering him felt like it came as a surprise that it was really not taken well. It was not a well-received speech by everyone.
From whom are we talking about?
Hamas is disappointed.
Hamas was disappointed before and after.
The pro-Hezbollah warmongers, let's say, that there's not going to be war, that there's going to be what feels like status quo.
Yeah.
The people that hate Hezbollah for a living, the commentators that trash this group every day from this station to every station. Like, what was that?
I mean, I don't know about their Hezbollah stronghold people. I don't know if they
maybe
were.
the base will cheer him on whatever he says.
Yes.
But I noticed that there, in my lifetime, and you were 12 in 2006, I was 25. That was a moment everyone went home, like you said, in anticipation of war. In May 2008, I was running home while Hassan Nasrallah was on television because I knew war was coming, and it came. In 2023, I'm on my scooter on the ring. Everyone's gone home, and then 90 minutes later, everyone's back out.
Yes.
There was a shift. That speech, I think, marked to me they've lost the narrative.
But is it not because his speech was for example, I live in Dahiya. After the Nasrallah speech, I was living at my sister's house in Babda. I went back to Dahiya after the speech because it set the status quo.
This is exactly what I mean. You went back to Dahiya after the speech.
Yes.
That exactly what I mean is that,
But it was his call. I don't understand your point. The reason why probably isn't it a lot of people went out and were relieved somehow is because he set the status quo to be relieving.
Sorry, you're fixing what I'm trying to say. You're saying it better than me. Hassan Nasrallah is no longer the defender of Palestine. He's just a rambling machine making speeches that don't make sense while Hamas gets bombed every day by Israel. That's what I meant. He lost the narrative. This is not a resistance force anymore, period. He had already lost a lot of it. What was left was Palestine. And even that didn't sell.
I mean, to play the devil's advocate, what Nasrallah said in his speech was, we are forcing the Israelis to deploy some of their military, like tanks, soldiers, whatever. He claimed it's a third of their forces are in Lebanon right now. And he said that that's a great support for Hamas because it lifts the pressure off them. That's the point he's made. And at the same time, Hezbollah can say, okay, we're helping Hamas. We lifted the pressure off them. We are distracting the Israeli army somehow. And our people don't want war. Like, didn't you guys say you don't want war? You should be happy by what I said. That's what they are saying right now. So yes, I can't give my opinion regarding what their intentions are, because I don't know.
Nobody wanted war on May 7, 2008. Nobody wanted a July war.
2006, you mean?
No, 2008.
Yes.
When entered Ras Beirut and the mountains, and nobody wanted war July 2006, but we got war. Nobody wants war today, including Hezbollah, which means to me, Palestine, the resistance, that whole cause that Hezbollah choked us with, it's not there.
I mean, I would agree with you if they did not have any confrontation with the Israeli army in the south. But they did, and they are the ones provoking. Like I tweeted something not a long time ago. I said the pattern of what's happening in the south is usually you hear about Israeli shells, you would want to confirm them, and you would know that a Hezbollah statement will come because the Hezbollah attack would have came before the Israeli attack. So Hezbollah are the ones who are provoking the Israelis.
That's a good point. They're
factually speaking.
You're right. They're attacking all the sites they used to attack in the 1990s. And to a degree before the July War, the cosmetic attacks, Shaba mostly, with the exception of a few missiles that go into Kiryat Shmona and these places. But otherwise, is it 50 Hezbollah fighters have been killed, or roughly?
More.
More than
It's around 65.
65.
Around, like maybe the number changed today, like between 60 and 70.
It's fewer than 100 Hezbollah fighters in almost 6 weeks now of fighting. Gaza is being decimated.
Yes. I think what you're trying to say is the response is not proportional with what's happening.
The speech is not proportional with what Hezbollah used to represent. And in my mind, the narrative, it's dead. This is Iran's wing and army that will only defend Iran. It will never defend Palestine, period. I mean, I can't say this in a way that maybe I'm not getting to the point exactly, but
I understand what you mean.
the junior partner, Hamas, is probably, I don't know what they expected exactly from Iran's preferred proxy, but they didn't get, I think, what they expected. And we're not getting, I think, the worst case scenario. Look, embassies were screaming and flights were packed departing this country. What is it now, mid-November?
Yes.
We're waiting for a second speech on Saturday.
Yeah.
Following what we expect is that this will be another disappointing speech too.
I mean, you're framing it as being disappointing. They would, their supporters, you're saying the narrative is done. To whom? Like Hezbollah had always had criticizers before this war and will continue to have after. Within their base, within their supporters, was the Hezbollah, this is the reference, was the Nasrallah speech disappointing? I don't think so.
I'm going to leave it there because we could probably keep
going.
And it's an interesting, I've never spoken about it this way.
Yes.
I'll ask you one more question before giving you the mic. Are you more determined than ever today to be a journalist? Now that you're really covering a regional nightmare day in, day out, you said it yourself, even on your days off, you'll be watching the news. Is this a unshakable commitment to coverage? And do you see yourself really in shining? Because I think these are moments where people can abandon this kind of profession for reasons that are justified. But you're going further into it. So is this really, at the end of the day, can I confirm that this is your calling, that you're meant to be a reporter?
I mean, to be fair, I haven't been asked to go to the border yet. Who knows what, like, if I were asked what will happen, how much I can start. Like, it will be the first war I'm covering. So who knows what will happen if I were asked. Definitely, like, part of the reason I am a journalist is because I'm a political geek. So I cannot...
political geek.
Yeah. So like you asked me last time, when did my political awakening happen? It happened in 2005. And since then, I've been following politics in Lebanon, outside of Lebanon. So even if I weren't a journalist, I probably would feel FOMO for the journalists covering this war, because I want to contribute in this in some way. Definitely, it's what's happening right now is a tragedy. What's happening in Lebanon, people dying, residents of these villages, border villages, are displaced. It's reminding me, I'm writing an article about how it's in a way similar to the pre-2000 times when these people couldn't go to their villages. People in Gaza are dying. I don't know about, there's a lot of people, including me, who cannot live their life while thousands of people are dying. So this is the current status quo. And even if I wasn't a journalist, I don't think I could escape it. Now, that being said, as sad as the situation is, work is interesting nowadays. When you've been doing this for a while, you have an added value to give. You have experience. You understand how Hezbollah, like, seeing the game, like, for example, I'm comparing how I saw Hezbollah's media, how they function in 2006 and now. When you watch it from the inside, it's, you get insights on, you have an idea, but you get insights on how they function. And you get insights on how the IDF functions as well. So definitely you learn a lot, you contribute, it's interesting, it helps you grow when you because you tweet more, you're following, people start respecting you more as a journalist, people listen to you more. Like, for example, Me and a lot of other journalists were asked in the beginning of these skirmishes on October 8 and 9, yeah, are we going to war or not? And we'd be like, God knows, we are not psychics. But like the families, the friends, I know most journalists were asked this question.
I think anyone with a heart has to feel so much empathy to what's happening in Gaza. And the Palestinian suffering is so immense that even if you're not a journalist, it takes its toll.
Yes.
Watching the news and seeing these horrifying images of Palestinians getting killed as collateral damage between a war that is mostly between Israel and Hamas, which predominantly kills Palestinian civilians, you can only feel terrible. But add to it, if you're trying to cover it as a career, I can't imagine the state of being for a journalist right now. And I think that reason alone is worth celebrating what you do, whether you're on the front lines or on a laptop. I think the images are in themselves horrifying, and you deal with this 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So that's my way of celebrating the work you do. But now it's time for you to play host, and you can ask me whatever you want.
Can we cut or?
No, we don't cut here. This is a natural transition.
Okay. Okay. Just I need a second to gather my thoughts. Really?
Well, that's how it works, Wael.
Okay. You don't edit anything?
Go ahead, keep talking.
Okay. So you were asking me about how it feels as a journalist, but I don't know how you view yourself. You do very similar thing to what Chatah does on his podcast. So, do you not view yourself as a journalist yourself?
No, I don't view myself as a journalist. And what makes me and someone like Jad Ghussan different is that he is a former television investigative journalist, and he's more recently a podcaster, but he also dabbled in politics. He ran for elections. I think, if anything, his career is more closely associated with professional journalism. No, I don't have the skills. I don't have the skills that you have or the skills that he had to claim to be a journalist. But I do offer my thoughts for a living.
And you're also kind of a political geek, even if you aren't a journalist. Before I ask you about where your political awakening came from, nowadays, for someone like you, how are you coping? How is the skirmishes? What's your perspective on it? And what's happening in Gaza? How do you feel about all of this?
So, as someone who's probably nearly twice your age, give or take.
No, not that much. But
no? Oh, good. So I feel younger right now for you saying that. 1.8 times your age, whatever it is. Somebody in his 40s and you're in your 20s?
I turned 30 this month.
When?
25.
You're still in your 20s as of this recording.
Yes.
So my 40s, your 20s. I've seen a lot of this tragedy for such a long time, and I know that my generations, the generation before me, my grandparents' generation, saw the same thing. So this is not a new story. It's an old story. So I appreciate looking at the bigger picture. I don't get caught up into the minute-by-minute details, because those minutes are minutes wasted. And I think they can take a toll that's unnecessary. This is a very old problem, and it's not new. So I do like to take many steps back. Maybe that's also selfish, because that way I can try to see the bigger trends involved and look at it through history, which implicitly means I'm not a journalist. And if there's a word to associate with this, it sounds pretentious, but I'd rather be considered a thinker than a journalist.
Okay, fair enough. I just want to add something myself.
Oh, but let me say one more thing.
Yes.
The toll is exhausting, because you don't have to be in this world to feel pain.
Yes.
Every time I look at my Twitter feed, I close it, because the worst videos are shared, and it's horrifying to see the carnage. So even when I'm not thinking, I'm just clicking. Yeah, this is an emotional, exhausting journey.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to escape this question, because it's probably hard, really hard on everyone, not just journalists, not just free thinkers, as you said it. I just want to clarify one thing. Like I said this point, I'm gonna repeat it. Lebanese side is fighting Israel. I'll tell you why. You'll know why I'm saying this. Is fighting Israel in a skirmishes, in a battle, and whatever. So whatever criticism I have for this side, now is not the time to say it, while they are still in the battle. But for you, Ronnie, you are a big criticizer of Hezbollah. During such times, because people might get over-aggressive with you while the war is happening, the fact that you are criticizing Hezbollah, do you struggle from that? Do you have second thoughts? Like, whatever opinion you have about Hezbollah, are you reluctant to saying during this time?
I wouldn't agree with the definition. I'm not a big criticizer of Hezbollah. I see this group as something that gets in the way of what should be a normal functioning country in a very abnormally dysfunctional part of the world. So it's not that I criticize Hezbollah out of preference. I think the way this group behaves is a fundamental problem to all of our well-being. So I'm not looking for ways to over-criticize or under-criticize anyone. I see this kind of arrangement, which is to me less Lebanon and more Iran, as fundamentally problematic. I will never apply caution to this group simply because the Israelis and Hamas are fighting each other. I will never give them benefit of the doubt. No. I think that would be a foolish way of looking at Hezbollah, because that is exactly the Kool-Aid we used to drink from the 1980s until the Israelis left. I have no fondness for that Kool-Aid. And I think you'd have to be very, very short-sighted and perhaps problematic, meaning you're willing to work with them for power. You'd have to be in that camp, and that's a camp that I don't belong to. I don't like to flatter a group that has caused this much damage simply because they also fight Israel.
Sure, but I'm sure you experience hatred for criticizing Hezbollah or other parties. Like I know you criticize a lot of parties, a lot of
Oh, you mean hatred
politicians.
like social media?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that comes with the turf. You just don't look at it.
Okay, so you're able to cope with it in a very smooth way. It doesn't take a extra toll on you during
I
this.
know many people that think every comment is worth replying to, and I think that's just a waste of time.
What about on a personal level, with the people you interact with? I assume you don't, people who could be, who could support Hezbollah on certain things.
Oh, for me, Hezbollah sympathizers are not my enemy.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll take it further. People that vote for that group, I want to talk to them.
Yes.
My beef is not with anyone that supports Hezbollah.
Yes.
My beef is what Iran did to Lebanon and how it interpreted Hezbollah decades ago into something that is so severely demented and unusually unreflective of what that group was many, many years ago. As problematic as it was back then, the monster that exists today, to me, is not Lebanese.
Okay, I wanted to ask you this question later, but since we're already talking about this...
I hope I answered that right.
Yeah, I think...
there are many that want to blame Hezbollah voters for Hezbollah. I don't see...
You separate the two.
I don't blame anyone for voting the way they do in this country because we live in the most dysfunctional country that's been paralyzed from politics.
So you view them as they are the equivalent of the voters of any other sectarian party to you?
To me.
The same brainwashed...
Oh, no. They're the same as anyone who votes for even a change MP. Okay. I don't blame anyone for voting the way they do in this country. For me, it's not a democracy problem. If Hezbollah had better politics...
Yes.
They should be rewarded for that in elections. This is not about politics.
Yes.
This is about peace and war.
So you're not saying Hezbollah supporters are worse, the people who vote for Hezbollah are worse than the people who vote for any other sectarian party?
I don't think of myself as better than them.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah,
I
I
don't think
believe
people
that.
know this about you, Ronnie.
Maybe they don't.
Let's expand on this point.
Sure.
Because of the
Hala bukra, you'll get a job here and I'll be fired.
because of the history, like the family, you come from a political family, if I may say, and your father was assassinated, and you are open about criticizing this group about it. Do you find, like, one of the criticisms I hear about you, because you're a public figure, is
Am I a public figure? Oh.
is because of like that history, the assassination of your father, that you can't be objective when it comes to Lebanese politics. You're always gonna blame Hezbollah or on anything. Like some say you focus on Hezbollah too much. So what do you say to that?
They're wrong. My feelings towards this group have nothing to do with my father's assassination. Actually, my interest in politics, you said it earlier, I'm a political geek, precedes that moment and transcends it too. That killing and what it did to me and my relationship to Lebanon have nothing to do with each other.
Okay.
I continue to love Lebanon the way I loved it before. I continue to think about this group's detrimental role in politics the way I did before and the way I do today. I don't blame Hezbollah's sympathizers. I don't even blame Lebanese for voting for them. What I do blame is Iran's role in this country right now. That, to me, is a fundamental issue, but I've believed that from as far back as I can remember. I'd like to think that I am as objective as anyone should be about that group's role in politics. So when I have not, if there's an accusation that I am unable to offer objective analysis, perhaps those people have never read anything I wrote or listened to anything I've said. Maybe they're just taking sound bites.
As in because you criticize everything you think is wrong and you criticize everyone?
I criticize what you should criticize depending on the problem.
Yeah.
If my problem is pollution levels in Chatah, I'm not going to blame Hezbollah. If a power plant gets built in Al-Hiri, I'm not going to blame Hassan Nasrallah.
Yes.
If there's some oil smuggled into the mountains in the 1980s through the Italians and some renegade Lebanese forces members, I'm not going to blame Hezbollah for that. No. Actually, I can blame endless things on things that have nothing to do with Hezbollah. But that group's ability to kill politics transcends all problems to me because it makes even the smaller things so much harder to solve. And I think ungovernability makes corruption 10 times worse.
Okay.
And I think system failure, the way it spills over, you have to go to the center of that. That does not excuse all the other stuff that's happened. Of course not. You'd have to be blind to only blame Hezbollah on everything that goes wrong in Lebanon. But you have to also be blind to treat them as one and the same.
I want to expand.
I'd like to think that I have better vision than blind on both sides.
That's fair. I want to expand on a point you said earlier. You said your interest in politics precedes Hezbollah. So I want to know, like...
No, I precede Hezbollah. I'm born before they were born.
Yeah,
but I was not... Yeah.
Sorry, I said it, but precedes Hezbollah's, as you say, Hezbollah's assassination of your father. But I want to know when your political awakening, when did it start? Like in 2005, I know you were protesting in the 14th of March protest, or what is it called, the Cedars Revolution. But you come from a, as I said, political family. Your father was a minister even before 2005. Correct me if I'm wrong. No, but he was involved with the Future movement or with Hariri.
He was an ambassador to the U.S. and he was a central bank vice governor before 2005.
Okay, so when did your father play any role in your political awakening? The fact that he was involved in politics, and when did this happen?
His career and mine only overlap through friendship.
Yes.
I don't think of Lebanon solely the way he does. If it intersects, it's great. And I find myself looking at what I write and then sometimes noticing something he wrote that is very similar to me that's flattering. But I would still come up with those thoughts without that. So that could be just a result of DNA. But I don't have any shape. I don't have a perspective that's based on what he thinks. I've come to my own conclusions. And the way I see Lebanese politics has nothing to do with his career. I think if there's a real moment of curiosity, I don't want to get into the details of childhood because those are maybe unnecessary. There are moments when I'm a teenager that may not be that important right now. A key pillar in my life is being here in 2005. And what I saw happening in those months that I think shape where we are right now. That to me, it changed the way I looked at this country. I mean, it goes back to being afraid to put the Lebanese flag on your balcony in 2004 to being afraid to not put your flag in 2005.
Yes.
I think there's a moment in 2005 that caught me. And maybe I was very close physically to Samir Asir's assassination. Physically, I was close to it. Maybe it also changed the way I look at thinkers and what their role is. I began to have preference to thinkers in this country, and that's really where I live right now. It's there. That's, I think, the crux of it.
Okay.
It's not Hariri, it's not Rafiq Hariri, wala Saad Hariri, it's not Tayyar Mustaqbal, it's not their allies in March 14. I think of them the way I think of them. I come to my own conclusions about them.
Why was 2005 very interesting? Is it because of the political assassinations that you are talking about, or it was about the fight to call for the withdrawal of the Syrian army in Lebanon?
It's not that, it's what happened after. It's the seeing how a beautiful moment can get destroyed very quickly. It's watching the Syrians leave and watching Hezbollah step in. And there's a window of opportunity there that I see killed by this group. That to me is where I believe this group has the capabilities no other group has. It's all in that window of opportunity lost, and every decision taken to cater to that group, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of pure access to power. I think all the problems go there. The good guys, to me, are dead.
Yes.
The bad guys, to me, are those that are eager to work with this group for power. So I don't have any difficulty condemning them. But there's a moment I lived in, and then I saw it destroyed. It jumps over to 2006 when I decided to work with a communist collective called Samidun.
That's so unlike you.
Well, you don't know me well enough. I'm from Hamra. I'm not from Ashraf.
Yeah, for sure.
I think of Hamra as my backyard, not Jamaize wala Marim Khayel. And I worked in Zico House, Samidun, with leftists, and I think all of them were pro-Hezbollah that summer. I worked and I went to all the schools that housed displaced Lebanese. I worked with Oxfam. I distributed hygiene kits to the displaced Hezbollah sympathizers of the South. I'm helping Hezbollah supporters.
Yes.
I don't blame them. That to me also changed the way I looked at this group, in that it's not about people. People can support or not support a group. That group has power with or without that support. That group used to have national support, or to a large degree. It was a popular party. It was weaker back then because Iran was weaker in Lebanon. It's unpopular today by many folds, and it's more powerful today because Iran is more powerful here. It has nothing to do with people.
Do you find yourself wanting to engage with with these supporters in particular?
I think if you're talking for the sake of finding answers and finding reasonable solutions, you should talk to everyone. If you're talking just for the sake of talking, no thank you. You don't have to talk just because you feel it necessary to talk. No, there should be a point to talk.
Yeah, but when you criticize the supporters of a party, when you criticize the party that aggressively, do you find it like could change happen because they change their mind about you while you are criticizing what they view as sacred, maybe. It could change happen this way. Could they change their mind when they listen to you?
I have no leverage over change.
Yeah.
I just have leverage over what I think is truth. And I will never let objectivity die on my watch the way I see it. Which is why when you said the noble pursuit for objectivity, to me is fundamental. And never wavering on the facts, to me is also essential. But placating because people are emotional, that's the dumbest road possible. That's short term. That means you're actually looking for power. I don't believe in the search for power. I believe in narrative. And I think that's what I do for a living.
So 2005, you were very involved in it, interested as well. Till when was your, if I may ask, your father assassinated?
December 2013.
Okay, before 2013, there was the 2008 May 7th incidents. Did it also change your perspective about Lebanese politics and about this group in particular? Was it a changing point? Like there's 2005, you said, the moment of political awakening, or 2004, like something in between. And then there's 2008. Was it a turning point as well?
It's not a turning point. It's actually just moving in the same direction, hiding underneath furniture in Hamra because you're being shot at. Yeah, that didn't change my opinion. It just cemented things that were true, which is this group is claiming authority and replacing the Syrians.
Yes.
I actually, hiding underneath furniture in May 2008 did not make me like this group or hate this group more or less. It just made me comfortable with my conclusions.
Okay.
This has got nothing to do with politics.
2013, your father gets assassinated. Was it, I should ask again, was it a turning point? Did it, on the way you viewed politics?
Did not change my view of politics one bit.
It didn't change it fundamentally, or not, even not one bit?
It didn't make me dislike anything more or less. It didn't make me appreciate anything more or less. It didn't have a political impact on me. No. What the only other moment I think that has shaped my views of this country is seeing another momentous occasion die in front of me.
Yes.
Which is October 2019. It's almost like the warnings of repetition. I'll tell you frustration. As much as you try to indicate that the same conclusion is going to happen and people refuse to listen, that's a frustration. What is also frustrating is when people come around later and say, maybe that was true. Then you've lost the narrative twice. Or no, you've gained the narrative, you've lost the battle twice. Also, with all due respect to all the people that don't like to blame Hezbollah, but like to blame everyone for everything, that was a worthless pursuit in trying to change their opinion, because these are con artists.
Just to clarify something, like I'm asking you this.
It's like the Lebanese forces in the port blast are the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Or that Hezbollah and Wael Hassan are the same thing. Or somebody who likes to talk a lot. Jihad Az'ur with Sulaiman Frangi are the same thing. To me, this is wishful thinking at best. But it's ideologically stupid. I don't have tolerance for that kind of blindness that can destroy anyone's brain cells. They're wrong in my opinion, and they should be called out.
Yeah.
Which is why I condemn them as much as I need to.
Just for the record, I'm not advocating any of the points you're saying. Sure. I'm just asking about them from your perspective. Yeah. That's the way you view things, and I'm asking about it, and I'm genuinely interested.
But may I take it one step further?
It's my turn to ask, but no, I'm kidding, please.
You started off by asking if I'm being, if I need to take a step back from condemning Hezbollah during this war between Israel and Hamas. Let's fast forward until today. Why would you give the benefit of the doubt to Hezbollah today? Look at what's happened, and look at what's happening in the south. That to me is it's the culmination.
What do you mean?
They're Iran's army in Lebanon. If you attack Iran, look out for what Hezbollah will do.
Okay.
If you move against Iran's interests, we're going to pay a price.
Okay.
You can bomb Gaza to smithereens. Hezbollah will do cosmetic surgery and ramble about it.
Yeah. Taking a step back, speaking about taking steps back from politics, I want to ask you about, because you used to be, I don't know what you define it, but a tour guide. What's the
More like I don't know. I used to offer history tours in Beirut.
Yes. And I heard a lot about your tours. Lots of friends of mine have taken your tours, and they said it was really excellent. And like I've never taken those, even though I would like to, as you may know.
You'd have to do time travel for that.
No, I'm sure as a friend you will make an exception for me.
No exceptions. I'm very principled.
Yeah, for sure. I want to ask you about like it's very clear that you like storytelling in general, and the way people describe this tour and the way I see you speak in your podcast, like it's a unique way of presenting things. It has a lot of storytelling. So where does this passion come from?
My father.
Okay.
He was a gifted storyteller, although he's better known as a Lebanese politician. But he was best at explaining. It comes from him. I think he had a very keen awareness of timing and location. I think he knew how to deliver a message. It's probably from him. I can't think of another source. I have respect for fellow storytellers, but they all happen to be Lebanese politicians too. So maybe they fit into the same mold. I like complicated people, and I like people that surprise me with their thoughts. And I like anyone, and I'm looking at him detached now. I like anyone that grows up in Tripoli who ends up being so unlike Tripoli today. And I like that layered, complicated person that could exist in Tripoli before and maybe cannot exist right now. And for me, that's a story in itself. That's the story of Lebanon. And what made him removed from his home, it's not Tripoli, and it's not Sunnis or Maronites or Rum or Armenians or Shia or Druze. It's what any group like Hezbollah can do in this country. In his time, it was the PLO. I'm living in my time, your time, our time. There's no such thing as a PLO. Or there's no PLO in Lebanon that's worth talking about. I see what he went through as maybe similar to what we're going through right now, except it's a more destroyed, uglier version of a beautiful story called Lebanon.
But how did that inherited passion manifest in you? Did you like reading books? Were you a book geek on the side of being a political geek?
I think reading a lot helped. People don't read anymore.
Yeah.
It's a sin not to read.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily come to his conclusions, but Robert Fisk really persuaded me.
Yes.
And I don't know the Beirut he lived in. I imagine it. Sometimes I walk on the streets he walked. Sometimes I stand in front of his building on the Corniche trying to see how he saw the world. I think you should read. And you should read people that you can later challenge.
Yes.
There's no dogma here. I think you should be able to comfortably challenge the narrative when you see it flawed. But you should also believe in a narrative that is real and not let it die on your watch. I think that's what's happening. I think the narrative that I think is closer to the truth has been thrown away. And you have to preserve it somehow.
May I ask which years did you do this tour?
After Samir Asir's assassination, because it's a tribute to him.
Okay.
From 2000, on and off from 2005 until 2019.
Okay, but people who have taken this tour, including journalists, told me they could not know if you're 14th of March or 8th of March. Did you not use the word Hezbollah in this tour? What it was, because it was history about Beirut, you're saying?
I'll give you an answer. I get asked this a lot, and it's
Yes.
true. I ended the tour with Samir Asir's assassination.
Oh, you ended the tour. What? Oh, I see.
I left it there.
Yes.
I left it hanging. And that was my way of not wanting to try to explain something that was still fresh. In 2005, you didn't know what things were. You couldn't imagine how this would all play out. But I knew that I started the tour after his death. I wanted to end the tour with his death. So I did talk about March 8 and March 14. I didn't talk about what happened later.
I think back then people, like when they blamed someone for the assassinations, back then it was the Syrian regime, not Hezbollah. Was it the case for you?
I don't think the Syrian regime operates alone in this country. Even on a bad day for them, they were working.
So even back then, that's what you...
To me, it was a machine.
Yeah.
The Syrians had a bigger role to play. I think we didn't know exactly Hezbollah's rule until later. But that's thanks to a standard that we somehow throw away in this country. That's thanks to an international investigation. A UN-led fact-finding mission gave us answers. So even if we're uncomfortable blaming Hezbollah, it's Hezbollah. The names are listed. So if we're better than the UN, which we're not, if we're better than international standards, which we're not, if all these hypotheticals were real, then I'd entertain it. It could be a Martian that killed him.
Yes.
It could be some renegade Wagner-like machine that this is all BS. We have the answers. It solidifies what you know already, the political reasons why the Syrian regime and Iran had their difficulties sometimes, but they mostly overlapped. And when the Syrians left, Hezbollah inherited a lot.
To end this episode with a point, if I may, like,
sure.
It's the first time someone interviews you on this podcast, right?
On MTV, yeah.
On MTV, okay.
Yeah.
I hear
the
a lot
last
of,
time too. No, I'm kidding. Okay.
I hear a lot of desperation in your tone to what's happening right now. Do you still feel? Are you optimistic about what's gonna happen in Lebanon? Where does this desperation comes from? And is there any optimism amid all of what's...
What do you mean by desperation?
Frustration, maybe, is the word.
No, I'm not desperate or frustrated. I'm comfortable with my conclusions.
Which are? No, I mean, moving forward, now, like, you described what's happening right now in a very frustrated, negative sense, like Hezbollah's intervention in the south right now and people being displaced and like, so moving forward, how do you see, are you optimistic about what's going to happen in Lebanon? Despite this war, despite the skirmishes?
It depends what you're asking. If you're asking about war tomorrow, I don't think Hezbollah is going to enter this war.
No, I'm saying Lebanon's prosperity in general.
Oh, Lebanon's prosperity. You can kiss that goodbye. That is not going to happen. And there's no security answer to a security machine. Lebanon doesn't have an opposition to this force. If we had one, we'd be in civil war. We don't have one. There's no diplomacy to curtail Iran from this country. Iran will get what it wants from this country. Maybe down the road, the Iranians will stand up and succeed. And then you could maybe look at this country a little differently. And you could see a Hezbollah that matures into something else. And maybe in their mind, evolves. Whatever it is, that is not going to happen now. And any deal in Doha, you can also assume comfortably, Lebanon will bear the brunt of it.
So you're saying it's never going to happen, or?
I don't know if never is the right way to describe it.
It's your own country. Do you not believe Lebanon can ever prosper?
No, I think Lebanon can.
Yes.
And the potential exists in every one of us.
Yes.
With the circumstances that we're dealing with, you can kiss that goodbye. If you create circumstances that challenge it effectively without divorce or violence or even imagination, if you find reasonable answers to get Iran out, and if you shield Lebanon forever from this nightmare called the Middle East, which maybe is impossible, maybe, then I think you could see long-term growth later, not now.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Ronnie, for always giving me the opportunity to appear on your podcast. And thank you for allowing me to interview you. I feel honored.
Thank you for letting me interview you. And Wael Taleb, always a pleasure to talk to you. L'Orient Today, you can check everything on Twitter as well. So it's a real treat for me to be interviewed by a L'Orient Today journalist. So thanks to you.
Thank you.
Thanks to MTV.